Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about Tom DeSimone's film Hell Night. This is a pretty standard 80s slasher flick. There isn't that much about it that's tremendously interesting. I'd say the only thing that really sort of stands out as somewhat distinct about it is that there's two killers rather than one. And often in slasher flicks, there's either a single killer or a family of killers. Even in this case, that isn't that much of a divergence because we sort of have the implication that the two killers are part of a family. Just they both, or at least one of them, killed all the other members of their family 12 years earlier, according to legend. So, this is a movie in which 4 fraternity and sorority pledges have to spend the night in an abandoned house. Let me find the name of it because I can't remember off the top of my head. The Garth Manor is the name of it. Raymond Garth. So the story, according to Peter, who is the chair of this fraternity, is that Raymond Garth murdered his family, his wife, and their 3 oldest children, each of whom had some sort of physical deformity or disability, and then he hung himself, leaving his youngest son, Andrew, to, I don't know, his fate or something. It's not really 100% clear. But he then says they only found 3 corpses. So, interestingly enough, Amazon Prime, in the service through which I watched this, in their I can't remember what they call it, fun facts section, or trivia section, I think they call it the trivia section, they identify this as a mistake. I actually don't think it is a mistake. I think Raymond didn't hang himself. I think that's a detail that Peter has gotten wrong. And so Raymond and Andrew are the 2 killers. So they are still members of family. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, that's the only thing I can think of that's slightly unusual for a slasher flick in this film. Other than that, it is bog standard stuff. So you have 4 fraternity and sorority pledges. Marty Gaines, played by Linda Blair, Jeff Reed, played by Peter Barton, Seth, played by Vincent Van Patten, and Denise Dunsmore, played by Suki Goodwin. They have to spend the night in this house. While they are doing that, the plan by Peter Bennett, the head of the fraternity, played by Kevin Brophy, his sidekick Scott, played by Jimmy Sturtevant, and the head of the sorority, Mae West, no, not that Mae West, played by Jenny Newman. The plan is that they're basically just going to play pranks on the pledges and scare them throughout the night. However, when Mae gets murdered and then Scott gets murdered, Peter sort of ends up on his own. He is terrified, then he gets murdered as well. The 4 pledges are now on their own. Slowly, they end up getting picked off. Denise gets murdered first. She is the sexually active, drug-using, drinking party girl, and so, of course, in the logic of horror films, she gets killed. Seth is the sort of dickish rich guy who spends much of the film upstairs in bed with Denise, Though, considering that so he, at the very least, has his boxers on the entire time. She has her underwear on the entire time. So it doesn't seem like they ever actually have sex, despite talking about that being their plan. They do seem to just make out somewhat awkwardly the whole time while drinking and doing drugs. Nonetheless, because they are the sexually active teens, they each get murdered. Standard horror movie stuff, etc., etc. Jeff is also a rich kid, but he is more sort of kind and humble and stuff like this. And so Marty, the working class girl who is our protagonist, played by Linda Blair, again, she is attracted to Jeff, but when she settles down to go to bed and he tries to get into her bed, she's like, nah, son, other bed. And Jeff's like, okay. So clearly Jeff is moving toward the sexually active teen side of things, and so he also eventually has to die. But because he is the love interest of Marty, who's the final girl, he gets to survive the longest, and he gets to help her make her escape. We have standard sort of imagery and things like this for a horror movie. We have a creepy, deserted house. We have the woods and a sort of hedge maze thing outside. Obviously, it's nighttime. We have secret tunnels, including both sort of underground, like crawl spaces and things like that, but also underground cave systems that seem to just sort of lead around. And we get, and at one point, Jeff and Marty, against Marty's better judgment, they go down into these caves because Jeff has stabbed one of the killers. They think it's a killer. But Jeff has stabbed one of the killers with a pitchfork a couple of times, which would actually be quite a serious wound. So they go down into the tunnel system to try and find him and finish him off. They find down there Denise's dead body eventually. But again, set up it at, again, this very standard sort of horror movie thing. It's a sort of table, a dinner table set up with the corpses of Denise and a number of other people in various states of decomposition around it. So you might think of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, for instance, where the dead are sort of carried out and set up at the table. You might think of Psycho, where the mother's dead body is kept, etc., etc. So, again, it's a very standard thing. It's not real clear who exactly these corpses are, but since they are in various states of decay, we're supposed to assume that Raymond and Andrew, who are the people I'm assuming are the killers, because that's never explicitly established. But I guess we're supposed to assume that they have been killing regularly, despite the fact that the police don't at all seem concerned about that, and there's no real discussion of like who these other victims are. If previous groups of fraternity and sorority pledges have gotten murdered, like that seems like a thing you might stop doing, but and so basically, yeah, you get this sort of thing. Teens are murdered in various ways, typically with farm implements and stuff like that. Seth actually does escape. He goes out, he climbs over the fence, slicing himself up on the sharpened top spikes of the fence, but he manages to escape. He goes to the police, and he's like, hey, there's been a murder. And the police are like, shut the fuck up, kid. You're part of that fraternity that we don't like. If you come back around here reporting a murder, we're going to lock you up. which in fairness is probably about on par with US policing, but that's really not how the police are supposed to respond when someone comes in, particularly if they're bloody, and they say, yeah, this has been a murder. So Seth steals a shotgun, goes back to the thing, makes his way into the grounds, ends up killing one of the killers, shooting him several times at virtually point-blank range with the shotgun before finally actually stopping him. So again, you get that horror movie element, that slasher element, where for whatever reason, the killer is incredibly difficult to kill, because realistically, one blast center of the chest with a shotgun is going to take out most people. This guy takes 2 blasts, and it's finally the 3rd blast, basically point blank, that finishes him off. We don't know which of them got stabbed with pitchfork either, incidentally. Seth comes back. He then gets murdered because, again, he's a sexually active teen in a horror movie. Marty and Jeff, who has been injured by this point, they attempt to get the shotgun. It does not work. They get attacked by the other killer. They end up fleeing. Jeff gets thrown out a window. Marty climbs up to the roof, over the roof, down the other side using the rope ladder that Peter and Scott had set up, and she ends up sort of fleeing. Seth had stolen a car to drive back to the mansion. Marty, it won't start, so Marty uses her knowledge of mechanics from her father owning a garage to hotwire it, and then Andrew, presumably, leaps onto the top of the car from somewhere, not real clear where, since he had been in the house just moments before. Marty crashes into the gate, knocking it forward, and ends up eventually impaling Andrew on the spikes. Then she just sort of sleeps in the car till morning, when she gets up and just walks off. Yeah, there's very little here that's sort of new or different or unique in terms of horror movie structure. But, I mean, it's got the standard elements. It's got final girl. It's got supernaturally tough killers. It's got dead bodies kept. It's got creepy gothic mansion. It's got dark woods. It's got basically all the kind of stuff you want in a standard horror movie. So, if that's what you're interested in, this is a great movie for that.